I never thought my life would turn into something out of a courtroom drama, but it did, all thanks to the woman who lived across the street. She wasn't just a neighbor. She was the self-appointed queen of our HOA, the type who would fine people for leaving their trash cans out for 10 minutes too long or for daring to plant flowers that weren't on her approved list. Everyone called her HOA Karen, and trust me, she earned that title. For years, I tolerated her antics. She left notes on my car, she filed complaints about my lawn, she even threatened me once for having the wrong shade of curtains. But nothing could have prepared me for the night my house went up in flames. Investigators found gasoline cans near the site, and camera footage from a nearby store showed her buying them just hours before the fire. Losing everything was devastating. Watching my home, filled with memories, heirlooms, and hard work, burn to ash was something I'll never forget. But what shook me even more was the sight of HOA Karen walking into the courtroom the very next week, smug as ever, acting like she was untouchable. She thought she could intimidate me the way she had intimidated the entire neighborhood. But this wasn't a neighborhood squabble anymore. This was arson, a felony, and this time, she wasn't in control. For the first time, it was her turn to face consequences.
When we think of community associations, or HOAs, we often imagine them as helpful structures designed to maintain order, protect property values, and foster a sense of neighborhood cohesion. In theory, HOAs serve an important role. They make sure the community looks well kept, that safety standards are maintained, and that shared resources like pools, parks, or walkways are taken care of. However, as with any system of governance, the intentions behind these organizations can become distorted when the wrong people hold too much influence. The danger arises when authority is concentrated in the hands of individuals who use it not for the benefit of the community, but as a tool for control, manipulation, or even personal vendettas. Unchecked power in a neighborhood setting may not seem as dramatic as unchecked power in a political system, but the effects on individuals can be surprisingly severe. A person with authority in a small community often operates with little oversight. While cities and governments have multiple checks and balances, an HOA board is typically run by volunteers, often neighbors, with minimal accountability structures in place. Decisions about rules, fines, or enforcement can be highly subjective, and in the wrong hands, this authority can escalate into abuse. What begins as a friendly neighborhood agreement to keep lawns tidy can transform into an environment of surveillance, intimidation, and hostility. The reason this dynamic is so troubling is that people's homes are at the center of it. A home is more than a building. It represents stability, safety, and identity. When someone in a position of power within an HOA begins to overstep, residents can feel trapped. If they resist, they risk fines, harassment, or even legal action. If they comply, they sacrifice autonomy over their own property. This sense of being cornered in one's most private and secure space is deeply unsettling, and it can create long-lasting psychological stress. Another critical factor is that most neighbors are reluctant to speak out against someone who is overly dominant in an HOA. Fear of retaliation or social conflict keeps many people silent, which only strengthens the authority of the person in power. This silence creates a feedback loop where the aggressor feels emboldened to push further, moving from strict enforcement of rules to micromanagement of daily life. In some cases, what might have started as an obsession with order and compliance can transform into a dangerous fixation on individuals who resist that control. Education on this topic is important because it highlights how ordinary people can recognize the early warning signs of power abuse in small communities. It reminds us that when one person dictates the tone of an entire neighborhood, the results can quickly spiral out of proportion.
The story of an HOA Karen taking her role to extremes is not just an isolated event of personality conflict. It is a case study in what happens when systems lack accountability. In such situations, small disputes can snowball into harassment, property destruction, and even criminal acts. Unchecked power in community structures also points to a broader societal lesson. Authority must always be balanced with responsibility and oversight. Just as democratic governments require transparency and accountability, so too do neighborhood associations. Community members must be engaged, attend meetings, and vote in board elections. Rules should be applied evenly and fairly, not selectively as a weapon. When residents stay informed and involved, they provide a natural check on those who might otherwise dominate through intimidation or self-interest. Ultimately, the danger of unchecked power in communities is not just about difficult personalities. It is about how authority, when given without guardrails, can warp into something destructive. It serves as a reminder that vigilance, participation, and accountability are essential in any system where people have influence over others' lives. Whether at the national level or in a small cul-de-sac, the principles remain the same. Power without limits can harm, and only through collective responsibility can communities remain safe, fair, and livable.
Conflict often begins with something small, and in many cases, it stays there, annoying but manageable. However, when it comes to certain personalities, particularly those who thrive on control, a simple disagreement can evolve into something far more destructive. In the context of homeowners associations and neighborhood disputes, this progression is especially dangerous because of how close people live to one another. A seemingly minor annoyance can grow into ongoing harassment, and in the most extreme cases, it can escalate into criminal acts that endanger lives and property. Understanding this escalation process is critical because it sheds light on how ordinary conflicts can spiral out of control when boundaries are not respected. Petty harassment in neighborhoods often starts with small gestures of disapproval, snide remarks, passive-aggressive notes, or repeated complaints about trivial matters. For example, someone may take issue with the color of a neighbor's curtains, the height of their grass, or the placement of their trash can. While such matters are typically insignificant, to someone with a controlling disposition, they can feel like violations of order or personal authority. What differentiates a normal complaint from harassment is persistence. Instead of expressing concern once and moving on, the person returns again and again, escalating their behavior each time. They begin to monitor their neighbors, documenting so-called violations, and trying to exert pressure through intimidation or formal complaints. This transition from irritation to obsession is often subtle at first. The harasser convinces themselves that they are simply enforcing rules or maintaining standards, but beneath the surface, their actions are driven by a need to dominate. Over time, this behavior begins to consume their attention. The neighbor is no longer just another resident. They become a target, someone to control or punish. The fixation can grow so strong that it spills beyond the boundaries of the initial conflict. What started with complaints about weeds can turn into following a neighbor's schedule, photographing their property, or spreading rumors within the community. At this stage, harassment is no longer about rules but about power, and the neighbor has become a symbol of resistance to that power. The real danger lies in what happens when obsession overtakes rationality. People who cannot accept limits on their control may escalate their tactics when they feel defied. This is when harassment can move from petty actions to criminal behavior. Property damage, threats, or acts of sabotage are not uncommon in extreme cases. The psychological pattern is similar to stalking. An individual becomes so preoccupied with another person that they justify increasingly harmful actions as necessary to reassert authority. For the victim, the consequences can be devastating, ranging from stress and fear to actual physical danger. Education in this area is vital because many communities do not recognize the signs of escalation until it is too late. When people dismiss repeated harassment as merely eccentric or just the way someone is, they may be overlooking early indicators of more serious problems. Addressing obsessive behavior early, through mediation, legal warnings, or community intervention, can prevent it from growing into something unmanageable. Likewise, victims should be encouraged to document incidents, seek support, and recognize that repeated harassment is not trivial, but a red flag for potential escalation. The broader lesson here is that boundaries are essential in all relationships, including those between neighbors. When boundaries are respected, small disputes remain small. When boundaries are ignored or deliberately violated, conflicts can fester and evolve into obsessions. The shift from petty harassment to criminal behavior is not sudden. It follows a predictable path of escalation. Recognizing that path allows individuals and communities to take action before a situation becomes dangerous. Ultimately, this dynamic underscores how fragile the line is between nuisance and threat. What begins as irritation over something as trivial as a garden decoration can transform into a dangerous fixation if a person refuses to let go. By taking signs of harassment seriously and addressing them with appropriate accountability, communities can protect themselves from the risks of allowing obsession to grow unchecked.
When a person loses their home, it is never just the destruction of physical walls and possessions. A house is deeply tied to a sense of identity, security, and belonging. It represents years of hard work, memories shared with loved ones, and the stability of knowing there is always a place to return to at the end of the day. When that is suddenly taken away, especially through an act of violence or deliberate harm, the loss becomes not only material, but also emotional and psychological. It is a devastation that reaches beyond the immediate destruction, affecting how someone views safety, trust, and even their own strength. Yet within this tragedy lies an equally powerful truth. Resilience, the capacity to withstand hardship and rebuild, is one of the most defining features of the human spirit. Resilience is not about pretending that loss does not hurt or that devastation does not leave scars. It is about acknowledging pain and still finding the determination to move forward. For someone who has lost their home, the path to resilience often begins in the most difficult days, standing in front of the ashes, overwhelmed by grief, confusion, and uncertainty. At that moment, resilience is not a loud declaration of strength, but a quiet decision to take one step at a time, even when the path ahead feels impossible. It may mean reaching out for help, leaning on friends or family, or simply refusing to let despair dictate the future. Education on resilience reminds us that it is not an innate quality that some people have and others lack. Instead, it is a set of skills, attitudes, and practices that can be developed. One key element is perspective. Those who cultivate resilience often find ways to reframe their experiences, shifting from asking, "Why me?" to asking, "What can I do next?" This reframing does not erase the trauma of loss, but it allows people to regain a sense of control over their lives. Control is crucial because devastation often leaves individuals feeling powerless. Taking back even small decisions, whether about temporary housing, salvaging belongings, or planning the first steps toward rebuilding, creates momentum and restores confidence. Another element of resilience is community. Tragedies, while deeply isolating, also provide opportunities for connection. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers often step forward in moments of crisis, offering support in ways both large and small. For someone who has experienced the destruction of their home, these gestures can be lifelines. They remind the individual that while the home may be gone, the bonds of human connection remain. Accepting help is not a weakness, but a vital part of healing. because resilience thrives when people do not carry their burdens alone. Equally important is the ability to see resilience as a process rather than a single act. Rebuilding after devastation, whether literal reconstruction of a house or emotional healing, takes time. There are setbacks, frustrations, and moments when progress feels invisible. Those who embrace resilience understand that strength is found in persistence, in showing up every day to face challenges rather than expecting instant recovery. This long view allows individuals to measure progress not by how quickly they bounce back, but how steadily they move forward despite obstacles. From an educational perspective, resilience also teaches a universal lesson. Adversity is inevitable, but it does not have to define the rest of one's life. The person who has lost their home can become a symbol of endurance, showing others that it is possible to suffer loss without surrendering identity or hope. This example is especially powerful for communities because it demonstrates that even in the face of destruction, renewal is possible. It shifts the narrative from one of victimhood to one of survival and eventual triumph. In the end, resilience in the face of devastation is more than rebuilding what was lost. It is about discovering inner strength, leaning on others when needed, and choosing not to let destruction become the final chapter. The house may be gone, but the spirit that built it remains. And that spirit, once tested, often emerges stronger, wiser, and more determined than before.
Justice and accountability are the foundations of any society that seeks to protect its members from harm. Without them, rules are meaningless, and those who abuse power are left unchecked to continue their behavior. When someone crosses the line from being a nuisance to committing an act of destruction or violence, the community's ability to hold that person accountable becomes not only a matter of fairness, but also a matter of safety. In cases where harm has been caused intentionally, accountability provides closure for victims, sets boundaries for perpetrators, and signals to everyone else that wrongdoing will not be tolerated. The principle of justice extends beyond the walls of a courtroom. At its core, justice is about restoring balance when it has been broken. When a person deliberately harms another, whether through harassment, property damage, or more severe acts like arson, they upset the balance of trust that allows communities to function. Neighbors no longer feel secure, victims are left in fear, and even bystanders begin to wonder if they could be next. Holding the perpetrator accountable through legal and social systems is the process by which that balance is repaired. It reassures the community that wrongdoing will not go unanswered, and it helps the victim begin the difficult journey of rebuilding. Accountability is also educational. It sends a message not only to the person being held responsible, but to everyone watching. In neighborhoods, workplaces, or broader society, consequences remind people that actions carry weight. When someone sees that destructive behavior is punished, it discourages others from following the same path. Conversely, when destructive behavior is ignored or excused, it emboldens those with similar tendencies to push boundaries further. This is why accountability matters so deeply. It is not just about punishing one individual, but about setting a standard for the entire community. It is important to recognize that accountability should not be confused with revenge. The purpose of justice is not to inflict suffering, but to ensure fairness, safety, and restoration. Revenge is fueled by anger and seeks to harm in return, but justice is rooted in principles and systems designed to protect everyone equally. In a courtroom, for example, the goal is to weigh evidence, establish truth, and apply the law fairly, regardless of personal emotions. This process ensures that the victim receives recognition of their suffering while also safeguarding against arbitrary punishment. From an educational standpoint, accountability also empowers victims. When someone who has been harmed sees the system respond, they feel validated. Their pain is acknowledged not as something invisible or insignificant, but as an injustice that deserves correction. This validation is crucial for healing. It transforms the victim's role from powerless sufferer to active participant in the pursuit of fairness. For many, simply having their story heard and their loss recognized is a powerful step toward recovery. Justice also strengthens the community as a whole. When neighbors see accountability in action, they regain confidence in the systems meant to protect them. They realize that they do not have to suffer in silence or accept abuse as a permanent condition. Instead, they are reminded that collective safety depends on a willingness to confront wrongdoers even when it is uncomfortable. This collective responsibility reinforces social bonds and makes communities more resilient against future conflicts. Finally, the importance of justice lies in its ability to prevent further harm. Someone who is held accountable for a serious act like arson is less likely to repeat it if the consequences are severe and clearly enforced. By intervening firmly, society not only addresses past harm, but also reduces the risk of future tragedies. In this way, justice serves both as a corrective force and a preventive one, ensuring that boundaries are respected and safety is preserved. In conclusion, justice and accountability matter because they restore balance, affirm the dignity of victims, and protect the well-being of communities. They are not optional ideals, but necessary safeguards for a functioning society. Without them, harm festers unchecked and destructive behavior spreads. With them, individuals and communities alike are reminded that fairness still exists, that wrongs can be righted, and that no one is above the law.